All right, good Monday. I have a story for you today. Years ago, during my 7th grade class, I had like 28 kids in there. They were all going crazy on their projects, working hard. I was really working hard myself, trying to make sure they're all safe and doing their work and trying to help them through the tricky parts of their project. And I noticed two girls kind of off to the side. They were just snickering, kind of laughing, and I walked up to them and said, "Hey, what do you guys? What's so funny? Tell me what's going on. I'd like to hear what's so funny." And they're like, "Oh, Mr. Heiser, it would hurt your feelings." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. Don't worry, I have thick skin. Let me know what's so funny." And they're like, "Well, Mr. Heiser, we think you might have a slow brain." And man, I laughed out loud. I'm like, "You know what? I think you're right. I think I do have a slow brain." And that leads me to this point here. They say the brain research, if you do any brain research, I've read a little bit on the brain. My wife took a whole series of classes through the Brain Institute, and we've had a lot of discussion about the human brain and how it works. And one thing you need to know is if you're under 20 years old, your brain is fast, man. It makes decisions super quick. They say that if you're under 20 years old, you make decisions 10 times faster than somebody who's over 20 years old. I think it was about 10 times. And that's really significant, right? So when you're faced with a decision making, a lot of youngsters, they just make decisions on the fly, man. They don't really take the time to think everything through. So that is one of the reasons why my brain goes a little slower, because I'm trying to think through all the possible outcomes of my decision. And sometimes, from my past experiences, there could be a lot of different outcomes, right? And I'll give you another example of this. And I see this all the time with students, just not thinking things through and making good decisions because they just simply didn't spend enough time making that decision. And when I was in high school, I had a couple classmates that they thought it would be a funny thing to do would be to take some water balloons, fill them up, and then throw them out of the car while they're going down the road. And it seems pretty harmless. I mean, a water balloon really isn't that big a deal. I mean, there's a little bit of trash that you're throwing on the ground, a little bit of litter. But otherwise, you really wouldn't think that would be too bad at first. But what happened is they were on a small highway, and they're traveling pretty fast, about 55 miles an hour going one way, and then another car was going the other way at 55 or more. And then they pitched the water balloon out the window. So essentially, if you have two cars going 55 in different directions, I mean, you could say that water balloon, I'm not going to dig into the physics here, but you could say that water balloon has like the force of 120 mile an hour, 110 mile an hour impact, somewhere in that range. And so that water balloon, instead of being water, turned into a rock and went right through the window of this car. And what happened is the glass from the impact damaged this lady's face significantly. So bad that she had lost an eye, and her face was cut up really bad, and to the point she had to have multiple surgeries, and it really impacted her life negatively. And it really impacted these students' lives negatively too. This happened in like April or May, or I'm not sure exactly when, but it was kind of the tail end of their senior year. And they were done. So that was it for their senior year. They were removed from school, and I think they had to spend some time in juvie. Not sure on all those details, but they didn't graduate at that time with the rest of their classmates. So super unfortunate for them. They had worked pretty hard, and they blew it all just for a bad decision. So they didn't think through all those consequences. They didn't think about the power that water balloon would have once you toss it out of a car. And unfortunately, we see that a lot with our young students, making decisions based really fast instincts. They're not really thinking things through of all the possible outcomes of that decision. So I would encourage you to slow your brain down just a little bit and try to think through all the outcomes of your decisions before you make them. And that is a really hard thing to do when you're young, but it's something that I think you can work on, and the more you work on it, the better you'll get at it. So there you go. That's your Monday story. Have a great Monday.